One recent report that appeared in Wired suggested that the United States has suffered through other difficult votes, of course, from the fraud-ridden election of 1876, in which 101% of South Carolina voters turned out, to the hanging chads of 2000. COVID-19 presents a historic challenge, and snafus are inevitable, but the goal, as always, is to win voters' trust. There's a famous saying that the point of an election is to convince the loser that they lost, says Ben Adida, the executive director of Voting Works, a non-profit maker of open-source voting equipment. If you've convinced the loser, you've also convinced the public. In January, while a novel coronavirus was migrating to the United States and beginning to wreak havoc, particularly in nursing homes in the state of Washington, it was discovered that Andrew Straw, a candidate domiciled in office space in Washington, D.C., had filed with the Federal Elections Commission with an intent to run for Congress as a member of the Disability Party in 3 states, Illinois, Vermont and Virginia, specifically in Virginia's 8th Congressional District, the 58th most reliable congressional district in the nation, top gaining Democrat Party district in 2016 and, according to Patricia Sullivan, the Virginia reporter for the Washington Post, the single congressional district that has decided the outcome for all statewide elections for the past 2 decades. The crown jewel, according to Sullivan, is the county of Arlington, where, according to Scott McCaffrey, editor for the Arlington Sun-Gazette, no Republican presidential nominee has carried that municipality since the 1980 election matchup between Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter. It was Major Mike Webb's suspicion that the candidate was attempting to handicap the race in Virginia by attempting to drain off votes that might oppose the Democrat candidates, and he presented a formal inquiry to the State Board of Elections regarding the matter, but it was their determination that there was no law to prevent any candidate from seeking election in multiple states. Early February, it was discovered that, on the 30th of March, 2019, and on the 30th of September, 2019, Donald S. Byer, Jr., the incumbent in Virginia's 8th Congressional District, through his candidate committee, Friends of Don Byer, accepted donations, totaling $3,000, from the Voices of the American Federation of Government Employees Super PAC, filing FEC 1373679, a separate segregated fund connected to a labor organization, since the 21st of August, 2012, and located at 80 F Street, NW, Washington, D.C. 20001, as recorded on the Statement of Organization, filed on the 28th of January, 2020. Moreover, corroborating evidence from alternate sources confirm that this entity was a super PAC in the year prior to the disbursement, and these donations are expressly prohibited under 52 U.S.C. Section 30116. Major Mike Webb presented a formal inquiry to the Federal Elections Commission, but, since March, there has been no action on the formal complaint. In March, after the report of the first laboratory-confirmed case of a novel coronavirus in Virginia, an examination of the World Health Organization, WHO, Situation Report No. 3, dated the 23rd of January, 2020, 1 week before it was declared a public health emergency of international concern, IFIC, indicated a variant migration pattern for the pathogen that enabled it not only to escape the draconian lockdowns implemented by the Communist Party regime in the People's Republic of China in Wuhan, but also evidenced a pattern of evasion, finding the novel coronavirus avoiding the top 16 domestic and international destinations from the Wuhan airport, and finding highest incidence in migration in South Korea, the avowed enemy of that communist nation. Around the same time of this discovery, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention identified a suspect tendency of a novel coronavirus to target primarily American passengers and crew aboard the Princess Diamond, a luxury cruise line that sailed from a home port in Yokohama, Japan. Major Mike Webb, a former Principal Staff Army staff officer who assisted in the formation of the intelligence organization that ABC News had reported was supposed to have alerted the president regarding an emerging health threat to U.S. forces in the Sino-Pacific Theater last November, immediately contacted both WHO and Senator Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, but, to date, neither WHO nor Warner have responded. But, in the November election, the hanging Chad for Virginia is quickly becoming a decision to attempt to force Major Mike Webb from the race that continues to battle its way through the courts. Webb was scheduled to file a complaint in the Circuit Court for the City of Alexandria on the 31st of March, 2020, one day after Governor Ralph Northam sent the state into disarray, issuing a stay-at-home order that practically shut down the entire state. The action was brought to compel the State Board of Elections to extend the petition signature solicitation period, in light of the impact of the pandemic, but also went further to challenge the entire lockdown order in a facial challenge to declare it unconstitutional. Rather than entering an appearance to try the matter on the merits, Attorney General Mark Herring chose the peculiar defense strategy to evade service of process by the sheriff to escape the jurisdiction of the court, which amounts to obstruction of justice. Herring chose the same defense strategy when Webb filed in federal courts to challenge the facial coverings mandate, and it only takes 2 attempts at evasion of a summons for an appearance in court to substantiate a charge brought under the federal racketeering statute. Early voting began in Virginia on the 18th of September, and after an attempt to compel the Board of Elections to apply to his campaign the pandemic exception that it had to other candidates, permitting them to qualify with a lower number of signatures, failed, when Mark Herring sent a team of 3 attorneys on the day of the June primary to court to quash the action. The matter had been indefinitely removed consideration, while the state Supreme Court decided whether to take it up on appeal. But, just before the beginning of the early voting period, an experienced litigator, Webb went to federal court to seek a writ of mandamus to compel the Board of Elections to apply the pandemic exception in tallying the qualifying signatures for him to appear on the ballot. And that is where the matter begins to get more interesting. Though, in Virginia, regardless of what is announced in the news as the official tallies for the elections, unanswered questions linger like hanging chads in Virginia as to why the governor, Ralph Northam, made the peculiar decision to risk a felony charge of obstruction of justice to avoid being brought into court on his COVID-19 response, why the Board of Elections would not simply grant to Major Mike Webb the pandemic exception that it had granted to other candidates, and or even respect his due process rights to a trial on the merits, and finally how rounds of litigation, especially relating to the state lockdown orders and brought by a congressional candidate, never found even a mention in the press. These questions, currently stymied in the courts, may well create a significant challenge for certifying the vote in the cradle of the presidents and determination as to which presidential candidate finally receives its 13 electoral college votes. Stay tuned for more. Reporting from the battleground state of Virginia, in what will truly be an unprecedented election.
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.